think love comes in many forms. When you're making your child breakfast in the morning, infuse it with love, let them
Mm.
know, I think like, that
Hmm.
you're not, it doesn't feel like a burden to be making you a meal. I don't feel burdened to be, washing the dishes. Infuse love into your daily chores that you might feel irritated about doing. I think that can be a huge, game changer for you mentally, because when you do your chores or you do your things with love, like, how lucky am I that I get to make my child breakfast this morning?
Hey guys, welcome to episode number 260 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. Parenting. Am I right? It's like a full sentence, just parenting. Oh my gosh. For those of us, especially if you are trying to run a business and raise a family at the same time, just hang on to your hats and glasses because, oh my gosh, this is not work for the faint of heart if you have been struggling with parenting. If you do that thing where you sit at a stoplight and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst, right? Or you have a moment you're like, I'm really good. And then your kid mouths off and you like lose your mind, right? This is what it is to be a parent. And it's all so normal. But today's guest, Holly Swenson, has four boys. Yes, you heard that correctly. A set of twins, a boy a year later, and then a boy about 4 years after that. You guys, talk about hanging on to your hats and glasses, right? I was sharing with her before we hit record about times when my son would be inside for too long because of the snow or whatever. He would literally climb up the wall, right? And just this thing that we do with boys. And I was like, you have four boys. Oh my gosh. And what has she learned through that? And I love that she uses real world experience to share with all of us. She's also the author of a book, Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow, which is such a cool name. We have the links to that book underneath this video if you're watching on YouTube, or in the show notes if you're listening in. Definitely recommend you check it out. What she's done that's really great, and it just goes along with her philosophy, is at the end of every chapter, you actually have the ability to reflect on what you've learned and sort of started to create a plan for yourself. Because can we just be honest about something, right? Everybody just thinks they're supposed to know how to be a parent. And then they freaking hand you this kid in the hospital and you go home and you're like, where's the manual, people? Right. And it really can feel that way. And then they age and grow and change and they test boundaries and they turn into people, but they don't have fully functioning brains until mid 20s. Like, it's this massive job. And I think what Holly's doing is working very hard to make sure it's easier for all of us. And that book is a great guide to help get you started on your journey. Holly Swenson is an award-winning and best-selling author of the book Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow, a revolutionary book on conscious parenting. She's also a wellness blogger, a perpetual student of life, formerly trained as a registered nurse and a mother of four incredible sons. She brings her wisdom and lived experience to the forefront of her writing as a means to help others on their parenting and personal path. She's found that beyond being a mother and a devoted wife, writing and sharing with others is one of her deepest purposes in life. And it's the ultimate motivation for her to help uplift and encourage fellow human beings around the world. Internal and external change is possible. One word, one habit, one tool at a time. If you have been struggling with parenting, which, can we be honest, we all do from time to time, you are going to love this episode. She drops tools and she talks about the 5 rights of parenting, which is a pattern and a method she kind of picked up from being a nurse, like the 5 right ways to deliver medication to patients, right? So good. She took that same model and put it into parenting. You're going to want to hear this. Pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Holly, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I'm so excited to talk all things parenting with you today.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be good times, good times. All right, woman. So you have like the four boys, right? You have this amazing life. You have all these things clearly that you could have done with your life, right? There's so many ways you could have taken your journey and what you're here to provide, and really expanding on your purpose. So out of all those things that you could have done on planet Earth, why is this what you chose to do?
For me, becoming an author really stemmed from, I think, having 4 children. It's all been kind of married together, but I really wanted to create a book that would be of service to other parents,
Yeah.
because for me as a mother, knowing what it takes to raise 4 boys, and also I have a background in nursing, so I just have this really strong caregiver tendency. I wanted to caretake for the masses, and so for
Mhm.
me, writing this book, living what it means to be a mother, and also what I'm witnessing in the world and the struggles that I think a lot of parents are facing, that was really a catalyst for me to sit down and really put pen to paper and start creating something that would be of value to people everywhere. I really want parents to thrive in their journey of parenthood, and I think it's possible.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. And it is possible, right? Like, oh my goodness. I think I have to share something with you. This is a little bit gossipy. I don't mean to be gossipy, but it was a moment for me where I realized parenting is very, very challenging and difficult for so many different people. I was raised in a really huge like community. There were kids everywhere. By the time I was 8, I was babysitting. Like there was always somebody had a baby on their hips, right? Like that was just sort of the way I grew up. And now I live on the East Coast. It's very, very different. And I remember my son was, I think he was 2 weeks old, right? So I've been a mom for all of 2 weeks. And I heard this woman on the phone in front of her child saying things like, I cannot wait for him to go to camp. I just need time alone. And I was like, she said that in front of the kid. Like I had that moment. That's what I mean was the gossipy pieces. I didn't mean to judge her, but I was looking at the kid and I'm like, oh my God, this is really hard for people. Like this doesn't always come naturally. And I think that there's more of a struggle out there than we realize. Because for some people, it's a little bit easier. For other people, we all have our days. Like, oh my goodness, there are days I'm like, I did this because why? And I love my kids more than anything, right? But I think there's like such a journey through parenting. And I love that your goal is really to help all of us make it easier.
Absolutely. I mean, I think parenting is one of the most intense initiations you will ever face in life.
Yeah.
You know, it's awesome, it's beautiful, it's joyful, but it can be messy and trying, and it's all of the things. And so that's where I think if you have some tools to help you navigate,
Yeah.
it'll help you just get more grounded in your journey and you know, and I think ultimately you learn to, I think, embrace it on a more joyful level too when you start to get more mindful in your, you know,
That's
on your
interesting.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. So do you think it's actually a little bit more like more knowledge that makes it more joyful? Like more of an understanding? Is it the tools? What happens to have it be more joyful for people?
Well, I always say like the first step, you know, like say you've just been busy, you've gotten slammed into becoming a parent, and you really have never taken time to pause and become, I think, more self-aware. So I always think
Mm,
self-awareness is the first step of like, how am I doing on this journey? Because I think so many people don't give themselves that moment of pause, that grace to check in with how you're doing. You know,
mm.
you're giving, you're giving, you're giving, and you forget to, I think, check in with how you're doing. So I always say like self-awareness is the first stop to start becoming more aware, you know, in your life. And also just like, how am I serving my family, but also how am I feeling as a human being? Because they both matter.
Yeah, they do. And that last part, I feel like that just does not get asked, right?
Right.
It's like give, 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 give. And then it's like, are you okay? It's like, yeah, the kids are great. This is how it's like, no, you, hi, you, how are you? Yeah. No, that's really great. And I
Yeah.
know like inside of this conversation, you talk about like the 5 rights of parenting.
Yes.
Can you share those with us? I'm really curious about this. I really want to understand this.
Yes. So, as I mentioned before, my background is in nursing. And so there's something called the Five Rights of Medication Administration. And it's essentially a check-in to make sure that when you're giving medications, you're doing the right thing, you're not causing harm. So, you know, it's like the right medication, the right time, the right dose, that sort of thing. And so for me, I internalized
Hmm.
that and I thought it'd be really cool to create something for parents. And so I created the Five Rights of Parenting. And so this is really designed to be, you know, a quick way to touch base with yourself on how you're presenting as a parent. And I think ultimately they work to ensure you're, you know, doing the right thing and not causing unnecessary harm to your child or yourself in the
Oof.
process, you know? So think of it as like a supportive parenting protocol. And the first one is right now. And this one speaks to being in the moment with your child and being present, you know, not working on, you know, 12 different things and, you know, texting and, you know, doing all of the things, you know, when your child needs you. It doesn't mean that you aren't going to be busy at times, and when those moments hit you, I think what's important is that you set a time to like connect. Like mom's in the middle of something right now, in a half an hour, you know, you and I are going to connect. And I think it gives them that sense that you are there for them if you can't drop what you're doing. But it also helps you to become more aware in your life and more present, because I think so many of us are on autopilot and we're not really giving our full attention to anything. I mean,
Right.
we're half doing everything. And so I think if you can just appreciate what's right in front of you and give it more attention, especially when it comes to your children, it's going to make the process more joyful, and your kids are going to feel seen, heard, and appreciated, and it's going to feel better for you as well. And then I think lastly on this point, you know, the reality is there are no repeats and that time is ever fleeting as a parent, right? So you
Yes.
want to maximize that precious time that you have and you want to live in the moment as often as possible.
Right. Right. Oh, I love that. Okay. Do the 5 rights for me one more time so we have a sum up.
You got it? So the first one is right
Right
now.
now. Right.
The second one is right intent, and I haven't
Okay.
gotten here. The third one is right use of speech.
Okay.
The fourth is right use of power. And the fifth is the right use of love. So
Ooh, the power. I'm sorry, you guys, for those who are listening and not watching, I totally just made a face. I was like, oh, that's good. There's wait a minute. So the power and love.
mhm.
Oh my goodness. Can we dive into the right use of power?
Yes, absolutely. So the right use of power is the fourth one. And this is something that I think you want to wield with care, right? You are the one responsible for setting boundaries, the discipline, and you ultimately have the final say
Mm,
in whatever issue might arise, along the 18 years that you're blessed to have your children under your roof. And so I think you want to step into that role with care. And I think you want to not abuse that power. And so when it comes to setting a framework in your home or whatever boundaries or whatever it is that you are setting as that, foundational piece for your children, I think you want to be intentional and mindful and use care. I think it's super important to just really have more consciousness when it comes to wielding that power in your home.
yeah. And I think one of the reasons I zeroed in on it is I think a lot of times, at least in my work, right? I talk about this a lot. I feel like we can have force and
Yes,
power confused. Or they get
absolutely.
collapsed sometimes, right? It's like, no, no, no.
Yes.
Power is very different from being forceful. Can you say a
Yes.
little bit more about? I love that you're saying use the power with care.
Yep.
And we also know there are a lot of parents who would rather be best friends than be parents, right? So, like, where is that boundary for us in
Yep.
understanding when to be the parent, right? And
Mhm.
when to like be wise about because I said so, right? Like, is that a good thing to
Exactly.
say? You know what
Well,
I mean?
and that's
Yeah,
how I think that's how we were raised of like, I
totally.
think we're getting more conscious as we continue down the path as human beings. But I think, I believe that you can be, a mindful, gentle, caring parent and have strong boundaries and in fact, that will actually make your relationship better and it will provide more clarity.
Mm,
It'll be clear, clarity for your child of like what's acceptable and what's not.
yeah.
And I think they know your boundaries. And then I think I also love the idea of having the dialogue with your child, of also asking them what their boundaries feel like. Do you have any boundaries? And having, inviting them into that conversation. It doesn't mean you necessarily you're going to agree with everything that they're sharing, or that, but I think it gives them a seat at the table to be an active participant in your family and have them feel like they have some autonomy over who they are
Mm.
as human beings. I always love the idea of collaboration and even when it comes to your family and your children. And you ultimately need to set those final boundaries, but I think inviting conversation is really healthy.
Oh, no question. It's so funny. I was really excited to talk to you today. I'm just going to put this in here because I was looking at all the stuff, all my own parenting questions. I'm like, let me see if we can talk about right. Like, oh my God, so much. But I saw like, the meme advice that floats around on Instagram, right? And I thought this was really interesting. And since you're talking about collaboration and power, and I can't wait to get to love too, but it was something like I've learned to ask my children at the end of every day, is there anything I need to apologize for? And I was like,
Mhm.
whoa. What are
Yes.
your thoughts on that? Like, is that a good way to open up a dialogue? Is that a good way to use power? I'd love to
Yeah.
know what you think about that.
Well, I definitely believe in the power of apology
Mm,
because the reality is, as hard as you're trying to be a good parent, you are going to have moments where you are not showing up the way you intend to, and so I am wholeheartedly a believer in apology. And I think it role models for your kids what it means to
mm,
say you're sorry, and make
yeah,
amends because that's something that you will need to use throughout your whole life. No matter how wonderful a person you are, you still have moments where you need to say, I'm sorry.
yeah.
And and I love, I haven't seen the one about it every night at, before bed, but I think it is a great, gateway to more conversation and deeper understanding. One thing that we do like at our table is rosebud thorn, which is where you ask your kid about like the best part of their day, anything they're looking forward to, and maybe any struggles they faced. And so I love anything that I think leads to deeper connection with
Mm.
your family is something that you should use and lean on for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I do too. I think that's what it spurred in me too, is like, oh, I bet that opens up a boatload of conversation. And I think too, especially with teenagers, I've noticed
Yeah.
like our circadian rhythms are like so off, right?
Oh
It's like they
man.
want to start talking at midnight. I'm like, okay, right? Because it's like when they really open up and start talking, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like the cartoon with the toothpicks in my. I'm like, okay, let's
Oh
go,
yeah.
right?
I know.
So
I like
yeah,
edit.
yeah. I'm like, that apology thing is gonna open up some conversation. Yeah, I was like, if I want to sleep, maybe not on the nights I want to sleep, but yes, the rest of the time, because
Yes.
they just really open up at night. I think teenagers do. It's really interesting to
Yeah,
see.
pillow talk is a great time to connect,
Yeah,
without a doubt.
I love it. I love it. Okay, let's talk about the power of love.
Yes.
How can we as parents really use that as I hope the foundation of our relationship with our kids?
Yes. So to me, the right use of love, this is by far my favorite right. I believe that love is the cure for all that ails us, parenting and beyond.
Mm,
And I think that this right should be used as many times a day as you can aspire to. I think when you let your child know how much you love them and
mhm,
are there for them, it's ultimately going to plant their spirit in deep, rich soil as they grow. And I think it's also really important that you're giving love freely and without expectation.
mm,
Your child, I believe, will likely mirror the love you give them. But even if they don't, like, if you're talking about teenagers, teenagers don't always reciprocate the way we hope they might, but they are receiving that love
mm.
and they are internalizing it, and it does make a difference. And so I think love is one of those things that you want to give as often as you can because it makes a difference.
What's a good example of that? I think I'm asking because I have one that pops into my head, and it's one that a mentor of mine has used in the like holding the space for a kid who's made a mistake, right? Like those things. And she said, it's like even if your kid ends up in prison, which could happen to anybody, wrong place, wrong time, like all those things, as you stand there and you say, you've got more in you. I know there's more in you. And like holding that space for growth and for potential. What example, when you say the right use of love, what is an example that comes to mind for you in a way that we could really love up on our kids, especially when they've made a mistake? Because I think they're really hard on
Yeah.
themselves too. Yeah.
Well, and I think love comes in many forms, when you're making your child breakfast in the morning, infuse it with love, let them
Mm,
know, I think like, that
mm,
it doesn't feel like a burden to be making you a meal. I don't feel burdened to be, washing the dishes, infuse love into your daily chores that you might feel irritated about doing. I think that can be a huge, game changer for you mentally, because when you do your chores or you do your things with love, like, how lucky am I that I get to make my child breakfast this morning?
mm,
You know,
mm,
tell your children you love them. I love
mm,
you. You take that time to look them in the eye and tell them how much they mean to you. And so I think, and like you say, holding space for your children, especially when they're acting up.
mhm,
It doesn't mean that love is always going to be, rosy and cheery, and you have hard moments that you have to process and deal with. But I think, if you can hold space, if you can learn to not dysregulate as much as you used to, if you can learn to being present is
mm,
also another way I think you can show love for your child. And I think like I said, I think it comes in many forms.
right.
I think you have to get curious too about what giving love to you means and what it looks like and
Mm,
how you can just, I think, share more of that on the daily.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. I love this. I love this. Okay. So you said the right use of love is probably your favorite.
Yeah,
Did I
it
hear
is.
that right? Okay.
Yes.
I know we jumped around because I got excited about power and love. Sorry guys, I get excited. Well, all right, so we have the right use of right now.
Yep. Right
Yep, and
now.
then right now.
Right.
Like this
Yep. And
use right now. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
The second one is right intent. Do you want me to back up and speak to that
Yeah,
one?
let's
Or do you
do
want
intent. Yeah, let's do intent
okay.
next.
So right intent is just being intentional with the choices you make, the guidelines you set, and how you treat your child. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it might be time to reevaluate your parenting strategy. If you're
Mm,
repeating what your childhood was like and it wasn't
yes.
all great, maybe you should pause and say, you know what, I didn't love the way I felt as a child, but yet I'm passing that on to to this next generation.
Mm,
I think it's an opportunity to get under the hood of like, whoa, okay, what does this look like? How can I be more intentional? And I didn't like the way that worked for me as a child, and I want to shift that patterning so that I don't pass that on, and so then they don't pass it to their children. So I think
mhm,
just getting, again, more intentional and more mindful in your parenting strategy.
Okay, I love that. Okay, the right use of intention. And number
Mhm.
3?
Is the right use of speech. And this is really important, I think,
Yeah.
especially as a parent. Your voice is a tool of creation. And so you have that power to uplift or tear down.
Mm,
And I think that this can be one of the toughest rights to implement in the house. And so I think you want to, again, speak with mindfulness. And if you forget, apologize, like we spoke to,
right.
because you are only human and you are going to misspeak and you're going to misstep. And so I think just trying to, I always believe in the power of like pausing. Like if you're getting triggered, to like, instead of opening your mouth and like, shooting it right back, to just like literally give yourself 4 or 5 seconds to just take some breaths
Okay.
and then start speaking. Because I think if you're feeling triggered, you're going to just throw back to your child whatever it is they're throwing to you, and it becomes counterproductive and you
Right.
both feel exhausted at the end of the exchange. So give yourself some grace and try to be as mindful as possible when you are speaking to your loved ones.
I love it. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
we have right now,
Right now.
right
Right
use of
intent.
intention,
Yep.
right use of speech,
Yes.
right use of power, right use of love. Yeah.
You got it.
All right, you guys, you heard it here first. You know what was happening in my head when you were sharing that too is I think that's great for any relationship. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I think there's so many, even our friendships, right? Or like the different groups of friends that we have, or family or romantic relationships, like to be intentional about where you want that relationship to go, to be aware and present as you're in it and watching what you say.
Yes. And
Like,
it's a hard, it takes practice,
yeah,
it takes discipline, it takes, I feel like anything to create new pathways, you have to practice at it.
yeah,
And if you're defaulting to your old ways, and those ways haven't been serving you, you might, I don't know, I think just stick with it. Try
yeah.
anything. I feel like try anything for a few weeks and it can shift your mindset. So give yourself some time and some grace to shift into new, healthier patterns if that's something that's calling to you.
I love it. And I think actually the right use of intention kind of leads into something else that I know you talk about a lot, and that is responding versus reacting, right? That
Yes.
those are two different things.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think these are so important. And, I think why I spoke to these is because I think it is possible to navigate parenthood with more poise. And
Mm,
I think when you lean on response, it'll help you make contact with that. But I want to first start with reaction. I
okay.
think the deal with reaction is that it's instinctual
Mhm.
and it can be easy to ignite when you're raising your kids. And so I think ultimately it's what's there waiting for you. And so unfortunately, it's an easy go-to, right? So reaction is not thought out or typically helpful in terms of redirecting what's in front of you.
Mm,
And I think what happens oftentimes with that exchange with your children, if you're having those tough moments, you're shooting right back to them what they're offering you. And the reality is you have a choice and you don't have to join in their emotional tornado. You have to choose to rise above or just hold space, to
mm,
not engage. And I think often parents have to make a snap decision and snap decisions in life, and they don't have the luxury to really think about how to optimally reply to a request, an action, or even a naughty behavior. And I think in that moment of feeling overwhelmed,
mm.
that's when you say things or you set consequences that you might later regret,
Right.
because you're not thinking, you're just reacting. And so what I would say is if your typical approach to your child having a tantrum is to scold them, stop, try giving them a hug and getting quiet if the situation allows, or if you feel like that's
Right.
appropriate, right? You need to gauge that for you. But I think oftentimes you actually will benefit, you both will benefit from a softer place to land. And that doesn't mean you don't set boundaries, but you need to still, I think, support your children are still developing, their brains are developing till their mid-20s, right? So you they're trying
Something
to
I
figure
keep
out how to
reminding my
be
18-year-old son of. I'm
no,
like, you're not done yet, kid.
you're not done.
Right,
So
right.
I think just giving that grace and
Yeah.
being a soft place to land, and while still having boundaries, I think you can do both. But you have to. I think it's a choice you make. And then when
Mhm.
it comes to response, to me, this is more considerate and more thoughtful in nature. You know,
Okay.
you're stopping, you're processing before you open your mouth. And I think this is a game changer. I think it does take more work, and I think it takes more patience, both with yourself and with your children. But I think that it's worth it. It's a worthwhile shift. And when you remember to respond, it allows you to process, remember your manners, your intention, your leadership
Yeah.
skills as a
Yeah.
parent. And then I think finally it allows you to move forward in a healthy and dynamic way. So it's going to help you improve your social skills, allow for more self-awareness, self-regulation, and ultimately more empathy for both of your journeys. Because it's like I said, it's an ever-changing process raising these children.
And it's tough being a kid, right? I mean, I don't think we talk about that part enough either.
Right.
And this generation, oh my good heavens, I feel so bad that they don't ever get to just turn off. I
No.
really get that in like that feeling from them a lot. And I didn't let my kids have social media until very, very recently, much to their chagrin. But
I
I
feel that a
wanted
long
them,
time too. Yeah, I
yeah.
was.
Oh, good. I'm glad to know it wasn't just me because
Yeah,
I
no,
was informed that it was just me.
no, I've been informed of the same, so you're not alone.
Thank you. But I've noticed such a difference, right? And the reason I waited as long as I could is one, there's just the nonstop, like just come home and know that once you're in this house,
Yeah.
you can breathe. And I
Yes.
feel like, letting the whole world in on them constantly, that must be so challenging for them. And we obviously don't have a blueprint for that either because we didn't have that growing up. We didn't have that constant bombardment of information, images, ideas, who's best, who wore it best, who looks the nicest. Like pick a thing. They just don't stop. And I really feel for them on that. And so I really appreciate what you're saying about the empathy for them as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're really going through it too.
they
And
are.
is this idea of, responding and, really being in the moment, is all of this part of, I know you really also emphasize the power of reflecting on how we're parent, what's happening in our lives. Is this part of that, or do you feel like the reflection piece is separate?
Well, I think reflection can show up in anywhere in life because I think being a parent, you have plenty of moments to reflect on how things are going, right? But I
Yeah.
think many of us don't give ourselves the opportunity to reflect. And I think that reflection is really that superpower in personal growth and in parenting.
Mm,
Because I think that reflection is really just a powerhouse for teaching you how to grow in life. And I think when you slow down and you do some internal gazing, it helps shed light on areas that need work.
yeah.
And
Always.
so I think it's important to make time. And in my book, I wrote questions at the end of every chapter as moments for the reader to reflect because I
Well,
think it's like when you're reading a book on parenting or whatever it is that you're interested in learning more about. I think you can absorb this knowledge or absorb whatever it is you're reading, but I think to pause and to kind of turn the mirror around on yourself and say, okay, wow, this is what I'm reading. How does this apply to my life?
mm,
How does this feel to me? And I think it stirs that curiosity in you to then, I think, give yourself that moment to get deeper and try to ultimately grow and continue to improve as a person and as a parent. I just ultimately I think that when you learn to pause, think deeply, look closer at your life, it allows you to shift and find more compassion for yourself and others. And I think that reflection also ultimately helps you take more ownership of who you are as an
yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
And it opens the door to become more victorious in your everyday. So it's something that I do think applies throughout. I really don't think it's like reflect just here. I think it's the whole the
It's
whole
the whole
thing.
game.
Go,
The
oh
whole
yeah,
game.
go as deep as you want to go with it.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, let's say someone's listening and they're like, wow, I don't think I've ever had that much reflection. Do you recommend that people actually set some time aside to reflect? Is it kind of like, hey, journal for 5 minutes before you go to bed? Is there anything like that that you like to do, or that, anybody who's read your book or really decided to dive in on who they're being and whether or not they're growing? Do you have any practices like that you recommend or that have worked for others?
Well, I think in terms of like, I definitely love journaling. I think journaling is powerhouse. It's definitely a power tool to just get thoughts out, get clear. Writing for me is a huge gateway. I also do meditation,
Mm,
and I can do, for me, I do reflecting, I do gratitude, I do different things when I'm sitting and having that moment of
mm,
of grounding. And I try to do that in the morning before my kids get up, when the house is quiet and when I can think and just, that the energy for me is the best in the morning. But I also think, some people might not have time every day, right?
right.
So maybe it's once a month. Maybe you set a date for yourself of like, hey, I'm gonna check in or set time for self-care and give myself 2 hours on Sunday to check in with my own heart and see how I'm doing. And so I think it's you figuring out what works for you. But I think that, and also there are so many tools out there, for inspiration of whether it's journaling or, meditation. I mean, I just feel like the world is ever changing, ever
Yeah,
evolving, and there are so many resources available to inspire you in whatever direction it is you want to go.
I agree. I agree. There's so much.
Mhm.
And there's so much information too, right? Like there's probably like different journals for different times or different ways to do it. Or yeah, there's so many awesome tools out there. I was just
Yes.
wondering if there was anything that you found specifically for parents, because I found the same one you did.
Yeah.
Like I remember growing my business when my kids were like, oh, heaven help me, 2 and 5. And I would get up every day at 4. So I would have 2 hours before the house, came to
Yes.
life, to really focus and produce. And those were the magical hours. It's so interesting. I
Yes.
know for everybody it's different, but I tend to find the early morning hours for moms is a
That's
thing.
my favorite. It's my favorite too. Or even if it's exercise, just
Uh-huh.
getting out
Yep.
and having time to move. I think all of those things make you a better human being when you
Right.
take care of you and then you can take care of them.
So this occurred to me as you were talking. So I don't know if this was like someone listening is going to be like, I am feeling this way. What would you say to a parent who at this specific moment is really feeling like they're failing? Like, those stoplight moments where you're like, oh my God, I am like the worst. I cannot believe, you know what I mean? Those moments. What
Yeah.
would we say to a parent who's actually going through that right now?
I would say you're exactly where you're meant to be.
Mm,
And if you are going through a hard time, I would try to get curious about where you are in life, because I always think like those moments actually are there to help teach you and grow. And I think if you can partner with whatever it is you're going through, whether it's, relationship, child, life, work, whatever it is you're dealing with, I think try to align with those hard, that hard ask or whatever, I don't, however you want to phrase that, but try to not go around, avoid, go right through it.
mm,
Work through those hard moments
mm.
and try to become stronger, better, braver, kinder, and I think for me, some of the hard things I've gone through in life have helped me grow in ways that I wouldn't have had I not had to deal with them.
Yeah.
And so I always think things are right in front of you for a reason, and there's a reason you're working through those moments, even if they aren't what you're hoping to be dealing with. It's we all have a different
Yeah.
journey. We all have different things we have to deal with. We're all human, but we all have a slightly different path. And so give yourself grace, give yourself compassion, and I think if you keep showing up for yourself, you keep trying to be the best person you can be, you will get through those hard moments. And,
Mm.
and I also think, when it comes to parenting, if you need outside resources, if you need outside support, don't hesitate to reach out, and get, whether it's professional help or maybe you need
Yep.
more time away from your children, get a, try to find somebody that can maybe help you so that you can have more mental health space or that sort of thing. So,
Mhm.
hopefully that feels helpful.
Yeah. And I love too the idea that there is no one way to do this.
No,
I feel like I say that to my clients all the time about business. I'm like, there's no one way. Despite what the memes on Instagram say, there is no one way to be a parent. There's no one way to run a business. There's no one way to be a great human, right? But it's that constant introspection and searching. And I think a lot of accepting, not
yeah,
accepting like, oh, well, that's just the way it is. Too bad. I guess everything stinks, and actually affecting what we want to affect, but really getting that there's probably something that's serving us at a higher level, even though it's horrible right now, or we can't see that. To really trust that, I think is hugely important.
yes.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Holly, thank you so much for spending time with us today. If someone's listening and they're like, oh dear God, I need me some more Holly in my life. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy your book. My book is Stop, Drop, Grow, and Glow. And it's also on Audible and anywhere you listen to your audiobooks. And then if you want to connect with me online, I'm at liveyourglow.live. And I'm also on Instagram, Holly Swenson _ live your glow.
Love it. All right, you guys, if you are watching this on YouTube, we will have links to all of that beneath this video. If you're listening in, those links will be in the show notes. Holly, thank you again for your time. I think we helped some parents today. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
I hope so. Thank you very much, Sarah. It was a pleasure to be here.